In 1983, Michael Jackson moonwalked his way into history on TV, and the world went crazy. Same time, Pepsi-Cola was trying to figure out how in the world do we break into Coke's monopoly. And they came up with a plan, and they called Michael Jackson and said, we will pay you $5 million to do a couple of commercials. And he did. And thus we have a Pepsi generation. A whole new generation of kids who thought Pepsi has to be what I want to drink because Michael Jackson drinks Pepsi. I don't know if he does or not, or did or not, but the idea of paying people to represent your company, to convince others to buy something or to be a part of something, became revolutionary. Last year, I think in the United States, they say $480 billion was spent advertising. China spent over $160 billion in online advertising in America because they know that this is how you influence people. You want to influence people to buy something. As I mentioned last week, another way we are targeted besides celebrity endorsements is through influencers. And these are the top influencers of 2024, and I know none of them. I think last week I watched somebody explaining to a parent who some of them were. I don't know who they are because I don't deal with that area. I don't live in that realm. But they are the highest paid, most active, most influential influencers in America in 2024. And none of them look like they're over 30. One guy might be. He may just look older. A good influencer specifically and intentionally builds a personal brand to a trusted marketplace. They do things intentionally to create a group of people who will follow them, and then they work at constant engagement, constant delivery of interactions that cause people to keep following and listening to them. And the more you can get them to listen to you, the more you can get other people to pay you to influence them. And so it's kind of like a cycle. I influence you, and the more I influence you, the more people will pay me to influence you. So this becomes their job. In fact, it's one of the favorite jobs of young people today in junior high. What do you want to be when you grow up? An influencer. I want to go online and people pay me to talk to people online. You know, they think it's going to be fun. They think it's going to be easy. I know it's not. I mean, I can't even consistently keep up with a simple website or a Facebook page. To constantly be putting out information and videos and things like that to keep my followers constantly following is just too much for me. However, they do have a lot of power. 18 to 34-year-olds are 63% more likely to trust an influencer than the product advertisement that the influencers are getting you to buy. So if the product says, this is who we are, you'll say they're 63% more likely to listen if one of them say it than the product itself. That's the nature that we live in. In fact, that's one of the big fears that people have today with AI is how much can we influence? Because if we can limit the influence of one group and push the influence of another, we can push the entire country or state or world into one singular direction because we're influencing them. We are easily influenced, often influenced, and people want to control that influence. What influencers have to have in order to be followed is trust. I'm not going to do it today, but there's 8 pillars of trust. 8 things that you need to have. Clarity, compassion, character, competency, commitment, connection, contribution, consistency. These 8 things, I found that spot again. These 8 things build trust. Now, different times, different ones are more important. Do you trust a guy to work on your car? You might want to focus on the competency more than the character because you want your car fixed, right? But if you're looking for someone to give you advice on how to interact with something or someone, you might want someone who has more character. But these 8 things are what build trust. One day we may talk about those. It's the role of an influencer to connect people to the object of our focus, and as Christians, we're trying to influence. Last week I mentioned one biblical concept of influence called leaven or yeast, where both Matthew 13 talks about the kingdom of heaven is like yeast, and in Matthew 16 it says to avoid the yeast of the Pharisees, because influence goes both ways, and that's what we looked at those earlier verses in the scripture readings. We are influenced sometimes, and sometimes we're trying to influence. What the Bible says as Christians, we're supposed to be trying to influence people, influence the world, not be influenced by the world. There's another way that the Bible talks about being influential, and that is in Matthew 5, verse 13. You are the salt of the earth. But if the salt loses its saltiness, how can it be made salty again? It's no longer good for anything except to be thrown out and trampled by men. He says, you are salt, not you're like salt. You are salt. If you're a Christian, you're salt. If you're not salty, then you're good for nothing. He says, then you've lost your saltiness, you'll be thrown out. You're nothing but gravel. And how does the salt lose its saltiness? Contamination. As salt becomes contaminated, it no longer works as salt. It no longer works the way it's supposed to. And so we have to be working at keeping the contaminants outside so that we can continue to be salty. Because, number one, salt is valuable. Salt's valuable. Romans believe that other than the sun, salt was the second most important thing that there is. In fact, many times Roman soldiers were paid by salt. That was their payment. The word salary comes from the Latin word salarium, which refers to payments being made with salt. If someone isn't a good worker, we say they're not worth their salt, because that's how you evaluated someone's worth. The people hearing Jesus say, you're the salt of the earth, was hearing that they were being told that they were precious commodities, that they were vital, they were important to God. And the reality is that we are valuable. As Christians, we're valuable to God in His efforts. What God wants to do, He depends upon His children to make it happen. We're the salt of the earth. Secondly, salt is preserving. Salt's used to cure, preserve, stop decay that would naturally occur in nature. Christians are given the task of arresting the decay of our world. That's our role, to arrest the decay of our world. As salt, we're designed to have a positive effect of the world. And if we're not having an effect of the world on the world, then we're not salt. If we are keeping our effect from the world, then we're failing as Christians. And if we are reserving the preservation power that we have to just us, just our folks, just our friends, just our family, then we're failing Christ's commission. We're to be salt of the world, not the salt of the church, not the salt of our family, not the salt of ourselves. We're the salt of the world. And if we're not being salty, we're either not being Christian, we're not acting Christian, or we're not acting as Christ's ambassadors the way Christ calls us to. Perhaps the most dramatic effect of Christianity on the world is in terms of preservation. Christianity did more in the world to preserve human dignity, the value of human life. Prior to God's law coming into His new nation Israel and continuing down through the church, life was not valuable. Infanticide, the sacrifice of children, was common. The elimination of people that were viewed as not healthy, not important, abandonment of children were all common things. It was a fact all over the world. You know, they talk about that slavery was a reality everywhere, and it was, but so was the rejection of children. So was the rejection of the infirm, the rejection of those who weren't deemed of value. Leviticus 18 and Leviticus 20, God in His law repeatedly tells Israel that if don't act like the people around you who sacrifice their children. And if you sacrifice your children like they do, then you're to be thrown out of the family, thrown out of the city, thrown out of the community. You're no longer to be considered one of mine. If you act like the people you're going in, and when they went into the promised land, He told them, don't act like them. In fact, the reason I want to eliminate them, when He said to destroy all of them, drive them out because they practice things that He says, I do not want you to be influenced by. And the problem was, when they got to a certain point, they got tired and said, this is enough, and left them there. And from that point on, they were constantly being influenced by Baal and constantly influenced by the sinfulness of the area. Hospitals, as we know them, began through the influence of Christianity. The Red Cross was started by an evangelical Christian. Almost every one of the first 123 colleges and universities in the United States had Christian origins, founded on Christians or by Christians to teach Christian purposes. Christians started orphanages. They started the adoption agencies. They started the children's homes. They started the humane treatment of the insane. Christians are the ones that impacted the world through the value of human life. Nothing in my mind is worse than for a child of God to be so in tune with the world, to be agreeing with the world about things like human life and their lack of value. When you're stringing an instrument like a guitar or you're playing a piano, vibrations occur when you're tuning it. And one C should cause all the other C's to vibrate on a piano, let's say. Because they get in, and if they're not, something's out of tune. That's one of the ways you figure out how to tune things, because when you're in tune, you vibrate together. We're supposed to be making the world vibrate to us. But too many of us start vibrating to the world. And we start saying, well, you know, I want to get along, or well, that makes sense, or well, we're supposed to be flexible, or well, we're supposed to do this, or we're supposed to do that, or well, I don't want to fight, or well, and that's not what Christians are supposed to do. You can't be salt and cooperate with the world. You've lost your saltiness. You're either not salt or you're no longer valuable as salt. Because you want to be in line with the world. We're supposed to vibrate differently than the world and work at bringing the world toward us. It's the preservating nature of Christianity. It's the nature of man without God to be selfish and violent and evil and lying. And as salt, We preserve what is good. We hold back the influence of all that is bad. And when we don't, we lose our saltiness. When we're not different from the world around us, then we will fail to hold it back, and we might as well be trampled by men. Thirdly, salt is flavoring. I grew up, my mom was told that my dad can't have salt, so she never used salt in anything. I grew up with a very bland food. All the food we ate was always bland because we couldn't put salt on anything. My wife, however, grew up the opposite. We got married, all of a sudden salt showed up in everything. Even things that were salty, we got to have salt and pepper on the table to salt it because, you might want more salt. I believe butter makes everything better. Salt sometimes does, but that's the purpose of salt. A dash of salt will often bring out the flavor of something. Too much salt, however, you take a bite and you say, what? Whoa! Who stubbed their foot while they were putting the salt in, right? Who took the cap off and poured too much? A little bit of salt creates flavoring. It makes things pleasant. It makes things appetizing. It makes things desired. It enhances the flavor. It doesn't cover it up. Christianity is designed to make us a better version of who we are. Being a Christian means we're the best version of who we are because we're salt. Fourthly, salt creates thirst. Many athletes have experienced the idea of taking salt pills. When I ran cross country, we had a dispenser, and we were supposed to constantly be grabbing them and throwing them in. I hated salt pills. I like Liquid IV. Guess what? It's full of salt. That was why it works. All my military kids, this is all we use when we're out in the desert. It really works. And why? Because it's so full of salt, it makes you drink more, and it makes you hold all that water in, because salt creates thirst. I used to use that when I used to drive cross country. When you have 8 kids and you're driving 14 or 20 hours, you try to drive at night so they can sleep during most of it. But you have to stay awake. So I would eat sunflower seeds, salty sunflower seeds, and pork rinds, and anything salty. So I would keep sipping on Coke. I'd keep sipping on caffeine. Now I'm older. Coffee. Lots of coffee. And then you could stay up all night because that salt creates a thirst. And you keep drinking, and that's what keeps you awake. Part of being a Christian is to create thirst. We should be creating a thirst for God and for Jesus in the people we come in contact with. And there's a variety of ways we might do that. And I'm not going to tell you about all the different things you might do, but it's our role to make people want to know about what we are and who we are and why we are. We create thirst. That's what being salt is. He says, you are the salt of the earth. And then he goes on and says that you are the light of the world. Matthew 5:14. A city on a hill cannot be hidden. Neither do people light a lamp and put it under a bowl. Instead, they put it on its stand, and it gives light to everyone in the house. In the same way, let your light shine before men, that they may see your good deeds and praise your Father in heaven. He says, you are light, not your reflecting light. Our light is not perfect because we're not perfect. The only perfect light is God, Jesus Christ, the light of the world that came down to man. Jesus is that perfect light. We are imperfect lights. We, though, are still called light. If you're a Christian, but you're not light, then you're not God. You're not Christian. You're not shining. You're under a bowl. There's a reason why we always make sure our kids know that song. Because one of the first things that happens to Christians as they mature is they start looking around and wondering, do I hide what I believe? Do I take what I know and I celebrate on Sunday and hide it so my girlfriends or friends at school don't laugh at me? So that my friends at college don't reject me? So that the people at work don't think I'm weird? So my husband or wife who doesn't want to hear about it doesn't bother me about it? So my parents or my kids or whoever else that I want to avoid having conflict with, I don't want that, so I hide it. When I was a youth minister, I had a piece of clip art that signified my Sunday night program. It was called Undercover Christian. You know, like we're secret agents. We're really agents, but we don't want anybody to know it. You know, it's like being in the CIA. I'm in the CIA and none of you need to know that. All right? Because I need to keep it secret. That's how Christians are sometimes. I'm really a Christian, but I don't want anybody to know it. I want to keep it under wraps. I want to keep it hidden. And how can we be light if we're constantly hiding it? Light does several things. One, light illuminates. It drives away the darkness. It creates confusion. As Christians, we drive away darkness. Darkness is what Satan desires because he lives in darkness. Darkness allows him to operate. He allows him to blind people. It allows him to bind people in the lies that he wants to tell. And I do not understand the concept of a Christian who thinks that we should not be involved in proclaiming truth, shining light, sharing good news, illuminating the dark places of our world. We want to keep it all wrapped up inside. It's like the kid saying, hide it under a bowl. No. And the older we get, the more apt we are. Sometimes it's our fear. Sometimes we just have so limited our contact outside that we don't have that many friends who aren't Christians. I've been a part of like 12 great senior programs. I mean, outstanding. And only one brought in anybody that wasn't our little group. And I'd say, you know what? You love once a month getting together and playing cards, and once a month, so they got together twice a month and do things. You love that. You live for that. You have a bunch of peers, a bunch of friends who would also love that. Invite them. Sure, not once in 10 years did we invite anybody to come. In one place, not once in 6 years did we invite anybody to come. And if someone did come in, they were like, well, I wonder who they're going to play with. Because we wanted to keep our light right here in our little closet. We didn't want anybody else to see it. We didn't want it to get out. We wanted to protect it. We wanted to keep it hidden away. Secondly, light clarifies, enables us to better, more clearly see with better detail and understanding because it shows features. It focuses your mind. I used to watch detective shows or any police show, and detectives walk in and the lights are on. And what's the first thing you would do? Turn the light on. And it's not. They pull out their little flashlight and they walk around with a flashlight. And I'm like, why do you have a little flashlight instead of the light on? Because it focuses their attention. And I used to think that's stupid. And yesterday I was looking for a cord that I lost. And I had the lights on. I'm wandering around and I can't find it. I looked for about an hour and I went and I turned all the lights off and grabbed a little flashlight and I started walking around. And you know what? I found it right there in front of me. But I found it because it focuses. It brings clarity. It's not just I need light to see, but it brings a focus. It illuminates. When Christians say that we shouldn't be involved in doing these things, it messes up because what we get from being connected to God is supposed to be used to help others get clarification. We break through the fog. We break through the false facades. And sometimes we know in our heads we're supposed to do these things, but we don't want to be involved. We don't want to put ourselves out. And if we aren't clarifying, we're not saving, we're not illuminating, and we're not shining, then we're just hidden under a bowl and we're not being light. Thirdly, light calms. You ever walk through a dark room? It's really black. You kind of know where you're going, but you're walking very gingerly, right? Why? Because you can't see where you're stepping. Those of us who are not like totally blind, we're used to using our eyes and seeing things and guiding our footsteps. I mean, we're used to that. We can't walk with confidence when we can't see. When it's not light out, we don't walk with confidence. We might say, I know exactly where I'm walking, but we don't walk very quickly because we need light to bring some clarification, some confidence. It calms us. When we walk through a room and the light's on, we calmly walk through without even looking down at the floor because we're used to it. That light brings a calmness to our fears. We know where we're going. We know what's around us. We're not afraid of our environment. The Cherokee Indian had a rite of passage planned for their young boys. Well, when their boys got of age and it was time to become a man, and they would have this special program. When you decided that you were ready to become a man, 10, 12, 14, whatever age you thought you were ready, they had a ceremony. At night, they would take the boy and they would blindfold him. And they'd walk him out to a log or a stump and set him down on that log and stump and say, you sit here all night with that blindfold on. And he's by himself. You can't become a man with a bunch of help. You become a man, they said, you come a man by yourself, so you sit here all night blindfolded. You take the blindfold out, you're not a man. You tap out, oh, I'm too afraid, you're not a man. And they would sit there all night on that stump, on that log with their blindfold on. And they would hear all the noises of the forest, wild animals. Is that a bear coming? When I walk outside at night, I don't hear anything until I shut my eyes and everything's dark and all of a sudden things get louder and louder and louder and louder. And if you don't know where you're at or what's going on or what that noise is or that was a little dog running up and all of a sudden you think there has to be a mountain lion or whatever, you're afraid. And those boys would sit there hearing all the horrors of the wilderness. And they would sit there all night long, all by themselves. And the light would come up. And the boys would be allowed to then take off their blindfold. And what they would see was their dad was sitting right there next to them the whole night, making sure they were safe. But they didn't know it. And they were sworn to secrecy. You didn't share that. Because every boy needed to go through, what is it like to be alone? Even though my dad's watching over for me. I think a lot about that when I think about life as a Christian. Sometimes I feel like I'm all alone. And the whole time, Dad's sitting there right next to me saying, I'll take care of it. Sometimes He does that with light. And sometimes He asks us to do that with other people by being their light. Light brings a calmness. If we knew what was real around us, we would always be calmer. The story in 2 Kings 6, when one of the kings in a nearby country or nearby city-state, if you will, was constantly trying to raid Israel, but kept getting thwarted. And they said, who's revealing all of our secrets? And they said, there's only one guy. He knows everything. He knows when you go to bed and you speak in your sleep. He knows everything. God tells him everything. They said, let's go kill him. And the whole army came and surrounded his house. And his servant walked up and said, oh no, we're dead. The whole army has come after one person. And he says, don't worry about it. Who is on our side is bigger. And he opened his eyes and he saw the hosts of God in all the hills all around, flaming swords and angels. And he says, just blind them. And the story, he goes out and he says, now that you're blind, the person you're looking for isn't here. Let me guide you. And he guides a whole army of blind people into the city of their capital. And he gives them a chance. Okay, now that they're here, do we kill them? No, he says, bless them and send them away. And it ends all of the problems. Sometimes we just got to see what's really around us. That's what light does. It brings that calmness. And finally, light leads. Light acts as a beacon that produces a destination and pathways. A city on a hill that draws people there when they're lost. Light becomes what you walk toward. You go toward the light. You allow the light to illuminate where you're going. It's harder for us to picture because we can't think of light without thinking of a flashlight or a lantern or a floodlight or a light switch or whatever, but we have a lot more control over light. But if you were simply limited to a little oil lamp and you could hold it up so you could see where you're going, it gave you a path. If you are somewhere and people are lost, you build a light and people can see the light in darkness and go toward it. Light provides direction. Light provides leadership. We ought to be drawing people with light. Not just to the light, but with light. We are light. We may not be perfect, but we're light. This is the word picture that Jesus used, is defining us as salt and light. And the question is he talking about the church as a whole? Is he talking about the church that we're in? Or is he talking about you as a Christian? The answer to all that is yes. But Jesus is the head of the church as a whole. He's the one that makes the church salt and light. And a few people are given responsibility to lead a congregation to make it salt and light. Whenever I need encouragement to buckle down and do something, I have a document that was very harsh. And it was a description of a person's evaluation of my ministry. And it was from a perspective that I totally disagree with, but it's just very harsh. And whenever I need to be motivated, I look at that and say, and what I actually say is, that is not what I want to be. And the perspective is that a congregation is designed to care for its members, which is a part of it. But sometimes it becomes the only thing that's important, and we lose track of those who aren't members. Or we disconnect from them, or we don't care about them because everything is done to reflect care for us. Like my mom and dad's retirement area. It's 2-room apartment, if you will, where everything is set up for them to celebrate them. They don't even have to leave their facility anymore because all of their memorabilia is all spread around, and all of the things that are important to them are right there around them, and people drop in and see them every now and again, and everything is right here. And church is sometimes like a little retirement home. We spend a lot of time worrying about us. But the church is supposed to be light and salt. It's supposed to be affecting people outside. And it's up to leadership to say, okay, as much as we want to care about people who are here, we also have to become, as a congregation, salt and light to the world around us. That's not necessarily your responsibility, but it is your responsibility for you. You're supposed to be salt and light. He says you are the salt of the earth, and you are the light of the world. And unlike our kids up here, we don't mind hiding under a bushel. We don't mind keeping it enclosed in a small space. We don't mind going and finding this beautiful new lamp, Tiffany lamp, and putting a nice bulb in it and turning it on and sticking it in a coat closet and shutting the door and no one benefiting from it. But we know it's in there. And sometimes we don't mind being useless in terms of how we affect the world around us. We're not salty. And when we bounce off, we want to make sure, oh, I hope I don't bother anybody. This morning, we started a look at the Beatitudes, and it closes with this thought. Just before we get to the passage here, and when we talk about salt and light, blessed are those who are persecuted for righteousness' sake. Sometimes we think that being a Christian means avoiding any kind of conflict. That we go along to get along, to make sure there's no conflict. And Jesus said, if they hate me, they should hate you, if you're like me. We want to be like Jesus. But how much do we want to be like Jesus? Do we want to be salt and light? Do we want to be an influencer? Or do we always want to be the ones who are being influenced by the world? As you walk away today, think about your life. Are you the piano string that you're trying to get the other strings that are not, the other wires that are not tuned properly to become more like you? Or are you looking for another wire somewhere that you can become more like? He wants us to be salt and light, to influence and not be influenced, and that's our call. So this morning we're going to close with this invitation song, a couple of verses to encourage you if you have a need to become a Christian, or if you have the need to ask for the prayers of the church, or if you have the need to come and request any aid that we might be able to give you. If you have a need this morning, we invite you to come to the front as we stand and we sing this song together.